I was there when they brought Eugene Fluckey back from his 8th patrol in the summer of 1945. The man walked off USS Barb looking like he had personally declared war on the entire Japanese Empire. And in many ways, he had. What he had done in Patience Bay violated every submarine warfare protocol written since the Great War. But the results spoke louder than regulations. Fluckey was 32 years old, a lieutenant commander who had taken command of Barb in April 1944. The submarine was a Gato-class boat, 301 feet long, designed for one purpose: hunt Japanese merchant vessels from beneath the surface, fire torpedoes, submerge, escape. The doctrine was clear, tested, proven effective across 2 years of Pacific warfare. But by January 1945, traditional submarine tactics were producing diminishing returns. Japanese merchant traffic had been reduced to a trickle. Convoys were heavily escorted. Ships hugged coastlines where submarines couldn't operate safely. The easy targets were gone. What remained required new thinking. Barb had completed 7 successful patrols under Fluckey's command, 17 confirmed ship kills, over 96,000 tons of Japanese shipping sent to the bottom. Impressive numbers, but Fluckey knew the war was changing. American submarines were running out of profitable targets in deep water. The Japanese had learned to avoid the hunting grounds where American subs traditionally operated. On January 8, 1945, Barb departed Pearl Harbor for her 8th patrol. Fluckey's orders were to operate in the waters around Formosa and the China coast. Intelligence suggested Japanese supply lines were still active in that region, moving materials between the home islands and occupied territories in Southeast Asia. The first 3 weeks produced minimal results. 2 small merchant vessels totaling 3,400 tons, respectable for most submarine commanders, but Fluckey had higher ambitions. He studied the intelligence reports and noticed something interesting. Japanese trains were moving significant cargo along the coastal railways: ammunition, fuel, equipment. All the materials submarines were supposed to target, but traveling by rail instead of ship. The trains presented a problem. Submarines don't sink trains, they sink ships. But Fluckey began to consider possibilities. Barb carried a 5-inch deck gun with 120 rounds of ammunition. The weapon was intended for surfaced attacks on unescorted merchant vessels, not railway bombardment. But a train carrying artillery shells would explode just as dramatically as a ship carrying the same cargo. On January 22nd, Fluckey identified a specific target. Intelligence reports indicated that a Japanese ammunition train would travel along the coastal railway near Shari on the Okhotsk seacoast. The railway ran close to the shore, close enough for accurate gunfire from a surfaced submarine. The plan violated fundamental submarine warfare doctrine: surface in enemy coastal waters, remain surfaced long enough to engage land targets with deck guns, accept the risk of air attack, shore battery fire, and detection by patrol vessels. Every submarine commander in the Pacific would have called it suicidal. Fluckey calculated the odds differently. The Japanese weren't expecting submarine attacks on coastal railways. Air patrols in that region were limited. Shore defenses were focused on protecting harbors, not empty stretches of coastline. Surprise might compensate for vulnerability. At 2100 hours on January 22nd, Barb surfaced 900 yards from the Shari coastline. The submarine's diesel engines were shut down to minimize noise. Only battery power for essential systems. The 5-inch gun crew took their positions on deck. Fluckey remained on the bridge with binoculars, watching the railway line. At 21 and 34 hours, the ammunition train appeared. Locomotive pulling 14 cars, moving at approximately 30 miles per hour along the coastal track. Fluckey estimated the cargo based on the train's length and observed weight distribution. Probable artillery shells, explosives, possibly fuel. He gave the order to fire. The 5-inch gun had an effective range of 15,000 yards. At 900 yards, accuracy was virtually guaranteed. The first round struck the locomotive, derailing the engine and first 3 cars. The second round hit the 4th car, which contained artillery shells. The explosion was visible from 20 miles away. The entire train disintegrated in a fireball that reached 500 feet into the air. Secondary explosions continued for 17 minutes as ammunition cooked off. The railway line was destroyed for 200 yards in both directions. Rolling stock, rails, and roadbed simply vanished. Fluckey ordered an immediate dive. Barb was submerged and departing the area within 4 minutes of the first shot. Japanese patrol boats arrived 23 minutes later, too late to locate the submarine. They found only burning wreckage and a crater where the railway had been. The success encouraged Fluckey to consider larger possibilities. If one train could be destroyed, why not entire railway networks? If shore bombardment was possible, why limit targets to transportation? Japanese coastal facilities included warehouses, fuel depots, communications centers, all legitimate military targets, all vulnerable to naval gunfire. But attacking fixed installations required longer surface exposure, more time for Japanese forces to respond, higher risk of detection and counterattack. The submarine doctrine emphasized speed and stealth for good reasons. Extended surface operations invited disaster. Fluckey studied coastal charts and intelligence reports, looking for targets that justified the risk. On February 10th, he found what he was looking for. Kashiho Harbor contained a fuel storage facility, ammunition depot, and railway marshalling yard. Destroying those targets would disrupt Japanese logistics throughout the region. The harbor presented unique challenges. Shallow water limited submarine maneuverability. Multiple escape routes would be blocked by geography. Japanese shore batteries commanded the harbor entrance. Any submarine caught on the surface would face concentrated fire from multiple directions. Standard doctrine would have classified Kashiho as unsuitable for submarine attack. Too dangerous, too complex, too likely to result in loss of boat and crew. But Fluckey had identified tactical advantages that doctrine didn't consider. Japanese shore defenses were designed to repel large-scale amphibious assault, not single submarine attack. The gun positions were sighted to engage landing craft and destroyers, not low-profile targets operating close to shore. Battery crews would be unprepared for submarine surface attack. More importantly, Japanese commanders would never expect a submarine to deliberately enter a defended harbor. The psychological advantage of complete surprise might be worth the tactical disadvantage of confined waters. If you think this sounds insane, you're beginning to understand why it worked. On February 11th at 0300 hours, Barb approached Kashiho Harbor on the surface. Fluckey had chosen the timing carefully. Deep night for concealment, calm weather for accurate gunfire, low tide to maximize target exposure. The submarine entered the harbor at 8 knots, just fast enough to maintain steerage way. Japanese sentries detected nothing. Barb's profile resembled a fishing vessel in the darkness. Her diesel engines ran quietly at low power. No searchlights, no challenges, no alarm. The submarine proceeded directly toward the fuel storage tanks. At 0347 hours, Barb reached firing position 1,200 yards from the primary targets. Fluckey could see fuel tanks, warehouses, railway cars, and ammunition bunkers through his binoculars. The entire Japanese logistics complex was spread before him like a catalog of profitable targets. He ordered the gun crew to commence firing. The 5-inch gun began systematic destruction of Kashiho's military facilities. First target was the fuel storage area. 3 rounds penetrated the tank farm, igniting thousands of gallons of aviation, gasoline, and diesel fuel. The resulting fire illuminated the entire harbor. Japanese forces finally realized they were under attack, but confusion delayed their response. Shore battery crews couldn't identify the attacking vessel. Barb's low profile and position within the harbor made target acquisition difficult. Several gun positions fired at shadows or friendly installations. Fluckey continued the bombardment methodically. Ammunition depot, 4 rounds, massive secondary explosions. Railway marshalling yard, 6 rounds, 23 freight cars destroyed. Communications center, 2 rounds, radio mast collapsed. Warehouse complex, 8 rounds, buildings reduced to rubble. Total firing time was 13 minutes, 47 rounds expended. Kashiho Harbor's military facilities were completely destroyed. Estimated damage exceeded $2 million in 1945 currency. More importantly, Japanese logistics operations in the region were disrupted for months, but Barb was now trapped. Japanese shore batteries had found the range. Shells were landing close enough to spray the submarine's deck with fragments. Searchlights swept the harbor, trying to maintain contact with the elusive target. Patrol boats were converging from 3 directions. The situation deteriorated rapidly. A 6-inch shore battery shell struck the water just 15 yards off Barb's starboard bow, sending a geyser of water crashing down on the forward deck. Shrapnel from the near miss punctured the submarine's pressure hull in 2 places above the waterline. Another shell landed 8 yards to port, close enough that the concussion shattered gauges in the control room and knocked 3 crewmen unconscious. Fluckey faced a choice: attempt to fight his way out on the surface, accepting casualties from shore battery fire, or submerge and risk grounding in the shallow harbor waters. Neither option offered good survival odds. Japanese searchlights finally locked onto Barb's conning tower. Immediately, every shore battery in the harbor shifted fire to the illuminated target. The next salvo bracketed the submarine perfectly. 3 shells landed within 10 yards. 1 round struck the deck directly in front of the 5-inch gun mount, killing 2 crew members instantly and wounding 4 others. Blood mixed with seawater on the splintered deck plates. The submarine's diesel engines were taking hits from shell fragments. Black smoke poured from the engine room ventilation. Chief Machinist Mate reported loss of power on the port engine. Maximum speed was reduced to 14 knots. Japanese patrol boats were closing from the harbor mouth at 18 knots. Simple mathematics indicated Barb would be intercepted before reaching open water. He chose a third alternative: emergency surface run directly toward the harbor mouth at maximum speed. Full power on all diesel engines, regardless of noise, except hits from shore batteries in exchange for escape velocity. Bet everything on reaching deep water before taking fatal damage. Barb accelerated to 21 knots, her maximum surface speed. Japanese gunfire intensified as the submarine's wake made her position obvious. 2 shells struck close aboard, flooding the forward torpedo room and damaging the port dive plane. But the submarine continued toward open water. The run to the harbor mouth became a gauntlet of coordinated fire. Shore batteries had calculated the submarine's course and were firing predetermined barrages at choke points. Patrol boats positioned themselves to ram if Barb slowed. Japanese aircraft arrived overhead and began strafing runs with 20mm cannon. At 0408 hours, a direct hit finally found its mark. A 4.7-inch shell from a coastal battery struck Barb's conning tower, penetrating the pressure hull and exploding inside the control room. The blast killed the quartermaster and wounded 6 other men. Electrical systems throughout the boat failed. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows on smoke-filled compartments, but Fluckey had calculated correctly. The Japanese were so focused on stopping one submarine that they failed to coordinate their attacks effectively. Shore batteries fired into their own patrol boat formations. Aircraft strafed friendly vessels in the confusion. The concentrated firepower that should have destroyed Barb instead created chaos among Japanese forces. At 042 hours, Barb cleared Kashiho Harbor and submerged in 200 feet of water. Damage assessment revealed flooding in 1 compartment, electrical problems, and structural cracks from near misses. But the submarine remained operational. Fluckey had successfully conducted the most audacious submarine attack of the Pacific War. The wounded were treated in the submarine's cramped medical facilities. 3 men required immediate surgery that the boat's pharmacist mate performed using dental tools and improvised equipment. All 3 survived, though one lost his left arm below the elbow. News of the Kashiho raid reached Pearl Harbor within 48 hours. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of Pacific Submarine Forces, personally reviewed the patrol report. His initial reaction was disbelief. No submarine commander would deliberately enter a defended harbor to conduct surface bombardment. The report had to contain errors, but reconnaissance flights confirmed Barb's claims. Kashiho Harbor was indeed destroyed. Fuel tanks, ammunition depots, railways, and warehouses lay in ruins. The damage was extensive, unmistakable, and clearly the result of naval gunfire. Fluckey had accomplished what an entire destroyer squadron might have attempted. Lockwood summoned Fluckey to headquarters immediately upon Barb's return. The meeting was private, but participants later described it as intense. Lockwood wanted to understand how a single submarine had inflicted more damage than most surface raids accomplished with multiple ships. Fluckey explained his tactical reasoning. Japanese coastal defenses were unprepared for submarine surface attack. Surprise compensated for vulnerability. Aggressive action achieved better results than cautious adherence to doctrine. The enemy's assumptions could be exploited by commanders willing to think unconventionally. Lockwood listened, considered, and reached a conclusion that would influence submarine operations for the remainder of the war. If unorthodox tactics produced superior results, then unorthodox tactics should be encouraged. Submarine commanders would receive expanded operational authority to experiment with new approaches. But Fluckey wasn't finished. Barb's ninth patrol would demonstrate that Kashiho had been preparation, not climax. In June 1945, he would take his submarine into Patience Bay and conduct an operation that made harbor bombardment seem conservative. Patience Bay was a Japanese staging area for coastal shipping. Small vessels loaded supplies from shore facilities, then dispersed to deliver cargo throughout the occupied territories. The bay was protected by shore batteries, patrol boats, and air cover. Standard submarine doctrine classified it as too dangerous for penetration. Fluckey disagreed. He had identified a tactical opportunity that doctrine couldn't exploit. Japanese defenses assumed attacks would come from seaward, but Patience Bay connected to the ocean through a narrow strait. A submarine could potentially enter the bay, conduct surface attacks on shipping, then escape through the same channel. The plan was more complex than Kashiho. Longer exposure time, more enemy forces, multiple targets requiring careful coordination. But the potential results justified the risk. Destroying the shipping in Patience Bay would disrupt Japanese logistics throughout the region. On June 8, 1945, Barb approached the strait leading into Patience Bay. Japanese patrol schedules had been studied for 2 weeks. Fluckey knew when guards changed, when patrols departed, when the strait would be temporarily unobserved. Timing had to be precise. At 02:30 hours, the submarine entered the strait on the surface. Narrow waters, rocky shores, complex currents. Navigation required constant attention. One mistake would ground the boat in enemy territory with no possibility of escape. Fluckey personally directed the approach from the bridge. The strait was barely 400 yards wide at its narrowest point. Rocky outcroppings jutted from both sides, creating navigational hazards that could tear open a submarine's hull. Tidal currents ran at 6 knots, pushing Barb toward the jagged shoreline. The helmsman fought constantly to maintain course while avoiding submerged rocks that appeared without warning. Halfway through the strait, disaster nearly struck. A hidden reef scraped along Barb's keel with a grinding sound that echoed through the hull. For terrifying seconds, the submarine slowed, as if caught. Emergency ballast procedures were prepared. If Barb grounded here, the crew would face certain death or capture when Japanese patrols found the immobilized submarine at daylight, but the boat scraped free and continued into deeper water. Hull integrity remained intact, though later inspection would reveal gouges in the steel plating that came within inches of puncturing the pressure hull. Patience Bay opened before them at 03:07 hours, 17 Japanese vessels at anchor, cargo ships, tankers, auxiliaries, patrol boats. The entire Japanese coastal logistics network concentrated in one location. Fluckey had found the target of a lifetime. He positioned Barb for systematic attack. First target was a 7,000-ton cargo vessel anchored near the bay's eastern shore. Distance 800 yards, angle ideal for torpedo attack. 2 Mark 18 electric torpedoes fired, both hits, ship sinking in 4 minutes. Second target was a tanker, 4,200 tons, carrying aviation fuel. 1 torpedo, direct hit amidships, spectacular explosion. The tanker broke in half and sank immediately. Burning fuel spread across the water, illuminating other targets. The tanker's destruction created an inferno that turned night into day. Aviation gasoline burned at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The explosion launched debris 300 feet into the air, and burning fuel created a slick that covered nearly 2 acres of water surface. Japanese crews on nearby vessels scrambled to cut anchor chains and escape the spreading fire. Japanese forces were now alert and responding. Shore batteries opened fire. Patrol boats began searching for the attacking submarine. Fluckey had perhaps 10 minutes before organized counterattack made escape impossible. He switched from torpedoes to deck gun. Faster target engagement, more ammunition available, better suited for multiple small targets. The 5-inch gun crew took positions and began rapid fire at Japanese shipping. The gun crew worked with mechanical precision born of endless training. Load, aim, fire, reload. Cycle time averaged 8 seconds per round. At point-blank range, every shot found its target. Supply vessels disintegrated under direct hits. Auxiliary craft exploded when rounds penetrated fuel tanks. Even armored patrol boats succumbed to concentrated fire. Target after target fell to accurate gunfire. Supply vessels, auxiliaries, patrol boats, all destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Barb moved continuously to avoid shore battery fire while maintaining pressure on remaining targets. Fluckey personally directed both navigation and gunnery, but Japanese resistance was intensifying. A destroyer sortied from the harbor's northern anchorage, her guns trained on Barb's position. The warship mounted 5 5-inch guns capable of sinking the submarine with a single salvo. Estimated time to engagement range was 6 minutes. Barb's escape window was closing rapidly. The attack lasted 23 minutes. When Barb finally departed Patience Bay, 12 Japanese vessels had been sunk or destroyed. Total tonnage exceeded 42,000 tons. More importantly, Japanese coastal logistics in the region collapsed completely. Supply lines that had operated for 3 years were severed in a single night. But escape proved more challenging than entry. Japanese forces had positioned patrol boats to block the strait. Shore batteries had found the range to the channel. Air patrols were converging from multiple bases. Barb faced coordinated opposition for the first time. Fluckey chose speed over stealth. Full surface run through the strait, accepting hits in exchange for escape velocity. Japanese gunfire was intense, but largely ineffective. Shore batteries couldn't track a fast-moving target in narrow waters. Patrol boats lacked the speed to intercept. At 05:45 hours, Barb reached open ocean and submerged. Damage was minimal. Casualties were 0. The submarine had conducted the most successful single patrol in Pacific War history. Fluckey's unconventional tactics had achieved results that conventional operations couldn't match. The impact extended beyond immediate damage. Japanese commanders realized that traditional coastal defenses were inadequate against submarine surface attack. Resources were diverted from offensive operations to strengthen harbor security. Shipping schedules were disrupted as vessels sought safer routes and anchorages. More significantly, other submarine commanders began adopting Fluckey's tactics. Surface bombardment of coastal targets became standard practice. Harbor penetration operations increased in frequency and scope. The entire character of submarine warfare changed based on one man's willingness to violate doctrine. Eugene Fluckey received the Medal of Honor for his Patience Bay operation. The citation mentioned his extraordinary heroism and distinguished service. But the real recognition was operational. Submarine Tactics Manual were rewritten to incorporate his innovations. What had been violation of doctrine became official procedure. Fluckey completed 2 more patrols before the war ended. Both continued his pattern of unconventional operations. Barb sank 17 vessels and damaged 12 others. Total tonnage exceeded 96,000 tons. No other submarine commander in any navy achieved comparable results through surface attack methods. The man understood something that escaped his contemporaries. Doctrine exists to provide guidance, not impose limitations. When circumstances change, tactics must change accordingly. Commanders who rigidly follow established procedures will be defeated by those who adapt to new conditions. This is why we study men like Fluckey. Not for hero worship or inspiration, but for tactical lessons. The war taught us that victory belongs to commanders who think independently, act decisively, and accept calculated risks. These qualities matter more than perfect adherence to regulations. Eugene Fluckey died in 2007 at age 93. His submarine warfare innovations influenced naval operations long after World War II ended. Modern submarine tactics still incorporate principles he developed during those Pacific patrols. The man who violated every rule wrote new rules for everyone who followed.